Welcome back to part 2 of this month's update. I'm Tom Sagona. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend checking it out when you have time. I'll put a link in the description down below. For now, let's talk about what's going on with real estate prices today, what it means for the real estate market as a whole, how it applies to the greater Denver, Colorado area, and most importantly, what you can do to take advantage. The National Association of Realtors isn't scheduled to release November's pricing data until December 21st. However, we do have the October report, which was released on November 18th. This report showed further decline in the median home sale price, as well as a steep decline in the total number of transactions, down 28% year over year, and makes a show of pointing out the sharp decline in year-over-year median price gain, which would appear to suggest that the real estate market is finally coming back down to earth. Don't worry, America, affordable housing is right around the corner. However, if you look more closely, it becomes apparent that several important figures appear to be missing from the national report, which made me start to wonder if it's telling the whole story. Fortunately, the reports from the Denver Metro Association of Realtors are much more detailed, and November data is already available. Now, I realize that Denver, Colorado is just one area, and things can vary quite a bit between locations. However, even if you're not interested in the Denver market specifically, you may want to stick around, because if you read between the lines, I believe the Denver reports reveal some startling insights into what may really be going on nationwide. To start with, Denver's median home sale price in October was only up by 5.8% year over year. So at first it would seem to appear that the Denver market isn't doing very well. However, the Denver report also shows separate values for detached single-family homes and attached homes such as condos and townhomes. And the median price for detached homes was up from last year by 6.5%, while the median price for attached homes was up by 8%. Even more interestingly, the average home sale price in Denver for the month of October was up by 8.2% year over year, and yet the national report contains no average price at all. In fact, I only found one mention of an average in an obscure footnote that essentially seems to dismiss it as being irrelevant. However, Denver didn't seem to think so, because they list average prices for attached and detached homes as well. The average price for detached homes was down from the previous month by less than 1% and still up by 7.9% year over year, while the average price for attached homes was up by nearly 8.9%. In fact, the only number that seems a little low in Denver for the month of October is the overall median price, which just so happens to be the only one that's included in the national report. Which is certainly interesting. But the real question is, why would this number be so low when all of the other pricing metrics came in so much higher? Simple. The median is not an average. It's just the middle number in a long list of numbers. And as we discussed in my previous videos, higher interest rates are cutting down on the total loan amount buyers can afford. So it makes sense that some buyers would be shifting into lower pricing brackets. And according to the national report, nearly half of all home buyers nationwide are currently shopping in the $250,000 to $500,000 range. So considering the median price of attached homes in Denver for October was just over $400,000, it's also easy to see why that sector suddenly seems to be doing so well. In fact, the November report shows the median price for attached homes actually up by 1.2% month over month, while the median price for detached homes is only down by 0.9%. So the shift in the overall midpoint actually seems to be more a result of a thriving lower-end market than a struggling upper-end one. And while the overall median price gain year over year is down again in November, it's only down from the previous month by 0.5%, dropping from $568,000 down to $565,000, which means at least half of all buyers in Denver are still shopping at or above $565,000. In fact, in Denver, not a single pricing metric for November is down by more than a fraction of a percentage point from October, which clearly demonstrates that overall price decline has almost entirely leveled out. In fact, it may even be starting to go back up. And if you look more closely, you can see that the rate of decline appears to be leveling out on the national side as well. Yet, while the national report devotes an entire page to emphasizing the drop in median price gain year over year, it makes no mention whatsoever of the change in housing prices from month to month, giving a false impression that housing prices are dropping more steeply than before when the opposite is true. But how is it possible that year-over-year gains appear to be dropping so suddenly when in reality prices aren't really going down much at all? Well, when you look at the median home sale price over time, it's clear that a seasonal drop in price is normal around this time of year. However, if you remember, last year was far from being normal. The Consumer Price Index, which we discussed in part 1, was already going up by the middle of last year and saw another alarming spike in October and November, causing an uncharacteristic surge in buying activity due to the expectation that interest rates would soon start to increase. So while prices normally tend to decline around this time of year, last fall was an exception, and we ended up with a sort of mini buying season, which actually caused prices to briefly increase. In other words, the current drop in gain year over year is more a result of last year's brief, uncharacteristic increase than any major drop in value happening right now. And once you understand that, everything else starts to fall into place. For example, a 28% drop in total transactions does indicate that there's less activity overall, but it doesn't actually tell us anything about the ratio of supply and demand, which is what really influences prices. What about the number of new sellers entering the market? Why isn't that included in the national report? And why is the continued drop in overall inventory being hidden away in the supplemental materials instead of being featured in the main presentation? Because as you can see, there has been an unusual surge in inventory during the second half of this year, but month-end active listings have been dropping off for a while now. And in Denver, the number of new sellers entering the market each month has been dropping even more quickly, with November's report now officially showing fewer new sellers entering the market than homes being sold for the first time since last January. Now, if you ask me, that is a lot more newsworthy than the change in median price gain year over year. Granted, average days on market did go up again in November, but that's to be expected when more than half of the existing inventory is left over from previous months. And to be honest, in the grand scheme, it's still really not that long. Oh, and market-wide price reductions are apparently also slowing, although there was no mention of that in the national report either. So you can draw your own conclusions, but when I look at the national report, all I see is a disappointingly sparse collection of numbers that appear to give a vague impression of a market in steep decline, but actually say very little, because the numbers that really matter seem to have been mysteriously left out. And if historical market data is any indication, we're already nearing the bottom of the current seasonal cycle. In fact, the Fannie Mae housing forecast predicts that buying activity nationwide is likely to ramp up again this summer. Depending on how things go with interest rates this week, as we discussed in part 1, we may see minor fluctuations up or down, but at this point, based on the available market data, the real estate market itself does not appear to be positioned for further significant price decline anytime soon. And while this year's seasonal price decline was slightly steeper than average, the peak was also higher. So although we have seen a brief correction allowing prices to come back to a slightly less unhealthy rate of baseline gain, it's clear that the price of real estate is still going up overall. In fact, cash still only accounts for 26% of all home purchases nationwide, which means that 74% of buyers in October still had to take out a loan. And as of November 4th, the average monthly mortgage loan payment is 77% higher than it was last year. So if 74% of buyers are paying 77% more, first of all, it would appear that the real perceived value of real estate may be quite a bit higher than what the pricing metrics say. But more importantly, it shows that there are still plenty of buyers out there who are more than willing to pay the price regardless of interest rate, which means demand is still strong. So to be honest, right now, at least in the Denver market, it seems to me that the only real thing that could force sellers to compromise on price would be an increase in supply. Which is actually sort of ironic if you think about it, given that the recent boost in inventory appears to have been nothing more than a brief media-induced frenzy of last-minute panic selling based on a fear of prices going down. But regardless, as of last month, 99% of outstanding mortgage debt had a lower than 6% mortgage rate locked in, with the median rate on outstanding mortgage debt nationwide sitting comfortably at 3.1%. In fact, according to this report, nearly 92% of mortgage holders in Colorado are locked in at an interest rate below 5%, accounting for more than 70% of all homes in the state. So an overwhelming majority of homeowners today would have to take on a higher interest rate if they decided to sell their current home and move. Not only that, but most of those people likely already made a change or refinanced very recently. So it seems logical to assume that very few homeowners at this point are unhappy enough with their current situation to take on a higher interest rate and sell at a lower price. In other words, potential existing home sellers today are in a pretty good position to simply wait it out until prices go back up. And if you were hoping we might get some help from new construction, the November 17th report from the U.S. Census Bureau shows new residential permits, starts, and completions all down from the previous month, with year-over-year permits down by 10.1% and starts down by 8.8%. After all, as rates go up and buyer activity slows, builders have less motivation to build new homes, because if they build too many, they'll end up having to sell them for less, which, unfortunately, just isn't good for business. In fact, Fannie Mae predicts that housing starts will continue to go down for at least the next year, so it looks as though the supply of new housing construction will just be starting to recover right about the same time millions of fresh new buyers are due to start entering the market. In short, while it may have been disguised temporarily, the real problem we're facing when it comes to housing prices is a shortage of supply. And to be honest, that's nothing new, with experts saying the decades-long U.S. housing shortage is only going to get worse in the next year. And if you're still holding on to hopes that the housing supply may begin to recover the following year or the year after that, here's a recent news headline that might give you some idea. Now, at this point, if you're looking to purchase your first home and you're still with me, you get a big high five for sticking it out. Because I wouldn't be surprised if everything we've seen so far has all but crushed your every hope and dream of ever being able to afford a home. But you might be glad you stuck it out, because there are still factors we haven't discussed yet, and as we go into next year, I believe there are still ways to time your purchase or sale correctly to maximize your benefit. However, I also believe that most people who try will do it wrong. So be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon for notifications so you don't miss my next video. And if you haven't hit the like button already, I really appreciate that as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in part 3.